Hey everybody, in today's video I want to talk about political systems in the world and international relations and power and all these things, because this is something that's been on my mind lately, and I just want to share my 2 cents with you. So when we look at the world today, and this is going to be like just my thoughts, okay? But if we look at the world today, we see many political systems that have been tried and failed or succeeded. And the main political systems in the past couple of decades can be split into three main categories. Let's say the first one would be communism. All right. So what is communism? Communism is the idea that there is no private property, and we want to build Jannah. We want to build a paradise on earth. Everybody's paycheck is the same. The idea is to build one social class without any capitalist owners who would then use you as a labor cost. And Marx thought that capitalism, this was like 1800 something, he invented it, and he thought that capitalism will collapse on itself because it's predatory in nature, and he thought communism is a kind of the next step. Now, yes, capitalism had problems because there were monopolies like Rockefeller and Rothschilds and all these people who were owning like railroads and oil refineries in the States, and one person owned all of these things, and then they built Manhattan, Rockefeller. But then there was a government that sort of created programs for welfare, for unemployment, for people who are old. And this is sort of the beginning of the social welfare state and social democracy that we see in Europe more evolved than in the US, because we also have a public healthcare system. In the US, you have a private one. So in the Europe, there was this push for social democracy. In the US, kind of regulated capitalism. But looking back to communism, basically the idea was very bad because it only lasted a couple of decades. We tried it out. It started in Russia. Marx was from Germany, but started in Russia in 1917. There was a revolution of workers, and basically my country, Slovakia, suffered from it for 40 years. We got occupied. There's not much you can do. And it's expansionist. So started in Russia, expanded in all the Soviet countries, post-Soviet countries then, Eastern Europe, even African countries and different regions in the world. Got adopted in China, kind of mixed it up with capitalism and North Korea. And we see that right now communism is sort of on a decline, because after 1989 it fell in Eastern Europe, Russia changed, Soviet Union fell apart. We knew this idea is kind of crazy. This is just a human concept. And China also realized this, but they want to keep the power, so there's just one communist party. However, it's not communism they want to pursue, it's capitalism mixed with communism, because they have private companies like this phone, Huawei or whatever is this. This is made in China by a Chinese company, but the more than 50% of it is owned by the state. And this is how Russian companies also work. So basically, communists run private companies. It's kind of a weird idea, but basically now I think the only pure communism is in North Korea. Maybe I'm mistaken. That's kind of what it is now. All right, so we have this crazy idea, right, of communism going against private property, going against money, and completely evaporating money as a system from the world, going against class system, and just going against any sort of individuality, going against religion, going against you as a person. Like, you have no value, only community matters. Everybody is the same. That's the idea. It didn't work out. 100 million people died. All right. Then, what's the other system? Well, we have liberalism, but there's mixed up many things in liberalism. So on one hand, we have conservative liberals who are sort of influenced by Christianity, because we have to look at it in context. Christianity didn't have a governmental element to it, but it was adopted by the Roman Empire. But Christianity doesn't have Sharia in itself. It is mixed with the state, but there was a dissolution. There was a separation between church and a state in the Middle Ages, or whatever I call this period, and then the Reformation within the church. And so then we have this scientific mindset. Liberalism came along and said, like, okay, we need to define morality, we need to define all these things now, because we don't have God now in Europe. What do? So we came up with the idea of, okay, let's use this harm principle, let's use these things which we will come from our own mind, like John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, John Locke got together, came up with a system, philosophical ideas, right? And basically that's it. They just said, like, we need to increase the freedom and happiness and pleasure and decrease the amount of harm in society, and that's it. They didn't really think it through. And liberalism was very, like, unpopular. And then it kind of grew, and now it's full spring everywhere. And that's one other idea, right? But it kind of has many ideas within it. So, but I want to focus on political liberalism. What is political liberalism? Well, if you haven't studied, and I want to give some credentials, right? I'm not just some random guy. I am, but I have master's degree in international relations. I studied some of these things. Basically, what happened? So there was a 20th century, communism fell, but before that, really, we have to understand international relations. International relations is simple. It's all about power. Who has the biggest military, the most amount of people, will be the biggest superpower usually in the world. In the history of the world, we had many empires, but there was no superpower, meaning Roman Empire didn't have any influence on China that much, or it didn't have influence on America because it wasn't there. So we lived in sort of like these regional power struggles, these tribal things in conflict. Then Westphal, I think, peace happened in Switzerland, 1648, and it established a nation state. So we got borders, countries. These countries naturally are formed around values and ideas. So in Europe, the values are freedom, let's say, not really democracy, but maybe before that it was like Christianity and stuff like that. So they form coalitions and they start trading with each other, and they trade with other people as well and stuff like that. And then there's sometimes a war, sometimes like a bigger country that wins, but there's no superpower in the world. So the world is governed by its own affairs in regions. So Islam had its own system. Nobody cared about it because you can't crush Islam. It's too strong. And also the same goes for communists. Like it's not communists, but like, let's say, other systems, other ways of life, ways of governance of society. It was just, each society was too fractured to take over the entire world. I'm talking the entire world. Unless we came to the 20th century, and with the advancement in science technology, we got nuclear weapons. Now, US was in a great position because geographically it didn't have any neighbors per se who were hostile. So it didn't have to invest that much in defense. And it was doing well because there was First and Second World War, which destroyed Europe. And Europe was economic powerhouse at that time. There was no Chinese, even middle class. There was nothing. And the whole world was kind of in the state of this sense of poverty, let's say. There wasn't like this middle class system developed or nothing like that. And so the US was pretty good, and they could build their country very quickly. And they announced this sort of Marshall Plan in Europe. So they rebuilt Europe. And in exchange, they got half of Europe, so Western Europe. But in exchange, they indoctrinated it, because Marshall Plan gave Europe like billions of euros or dollars, but US could set up military bases around Europe and say like, okay, you're your own countries, but we are sort of like protecting you. And we agreed, and I would love to agree with the US, basically because we got occupied by Russia. So there was no other chance. You either get occupied by Soviet Union or US. I would prefer the US 100 times a day, because Russians, it was a horrible 40 years. There's no freedom, there's no nothing. It's just better to get occupied by the US. As a European, maybe not you or someone who lives in Afghanistan, but as a European, everyone would love to be occupied by the US, because you get all the freedoms we have even now. And so this happened, right? So these two superpowers, they have nuclear weapons. They can destroy each other. This is called nuclear proliferation, I think, or something like that, where they had like 1,000 nuclear bombs. Soviet Union had 1,000 nuclear bombs. and it's just nuclear race, whoever has most. But they realized like if one uses them, it's the end of the entire globe. The whole world will disappear. So they just spied on each other, but didn't really want to kill each other because they knew like this would be the end, and this was happening, the Cuba and Cuban Missile Crisis and stuff like that. Anyways, Soviet Union collapsed because of their economic system, communism. It's weird. It doesn't have mindset. Like, it doesn't have money as a. It doesn't recognize demand and and all these things. So they would create like 50 TVs and no one would buy them, and they wouldn't care. They would produce more. So like it wouldn't go where demand is in the market. It would produce something that people don't need, and then people would steal it, and it would just create this crazy society. And so that's sort of two superpowers controlling the world, fighting everywhere. Vietnam, you have communist, you have capitalist. Korea, communist, capitalist. And you have all these proxy wars going on to figure out who's the best system in the world. And then it collapsed, and just America won. And now we have the age of superpower. This means America, what's the definition of a hegemony? Hegemony, maybe. It's the ability to deploy military within 24 hours anywhere in the world. That's why you need a lot of military bases and a huge military sort of complex and a lot of soldiers, which happens in the US. And basically they have military bases pretty much all over the world. And they can deploy anywhere with the top technology and destroy anything. So this is the only thing that US has above everyone else, and that's why they are the world policeman. And technically, I'm happy with the US being world police instead of Russia or China. Imagine China being the world's police. It wouldn't go well. At least US, okay, they have many problems, but at least, okay, it's better than China. It's better than Russia. Let's agree on that. Let's, like, for sure, it's much better. So then people were thinking like, okay, what is this? What's happening? So there was this guy Fukuyama who thought, he actually wrote a book on this. We had to read it. And he thought the history has ended. This was his idea. The history has ended. And then from now, we will just increase liberalism, which is now promoted by the US everywhere. We'll have NATO, which is this military pact against Russia. But again, essentially, there's no other superpower. Like Latin America's poor, Africa's poor, Islam is on a decline, Russia is done, China is kind of on the rise, but whatever. So we're good. We can do whatever we want. And basically, he thought like it's the end of history. By the year 2000, everyone will embrace liberalism and we'll all dance here. This is the idea that he had. Huntington came along and he wrote the book Clash of Civilizations, in which he kind of challenged this idea, and we had to also read this book. And he said that no, it will be like these proxy wars around the world, and will not be based around like political power, but around culture and religion. And he said like Ukraine will be one place where there will be constant war, because it's the clash of civilizations between East and West. And exactly that happened. And I wrote a book on the war in Ukraine before it actually happened. In 2013, I published a paper at the university about the Ukraine and how it was evolving. And I said like, within the next 2 to 3 years, Russia will invade Ukraine. I think like there will be like this conflict. And then I flew to Ukraine actually, and I saw the revolution. Anyways, I don't want to get into that. But so there was these things like Huntington saw like, no, there will be clash of civilizations based around culture and religion. And it will never stop. And just one thing to remember, the whole theory of international relations is based around realism and liberalism. But what do we mean by this? Well, liberalism is this Fukuyama guy. He thought like, and Henry Kissinger and all these guys they thought like, okay, we will only, liberalism is the ultimate end of human political system. That's the goal. Democracy, human rights, liberalism. Everyone should attain it, and we will just subjugate the entire world to it, or we will promote it, or whatever, and that's going to happen. On the other hand, you had realists, and they said, no, this is stupid. Like every country, every nation, every group of people has their preferences, and they hate to get new ideas, and they will fight you. And so essentially the world history is a constant struggle for military and political power. There's no such thing as ideas who are like great and we will all unite around them. This is all nonsense. There's only a nation state that will survive by using military and alliances and all these things, but these ideas above this global government, this doesn't make sense. And we can see this liberal mindset is what formed the European Union and then other projects. And the idea behind EU, I also studied this, so don't tell me I'm stupid. And it's basically EU started as a pact in the 60s or 50s in Rome between Benelux countries, so Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and I think France, Germany, or something like that. And they started to trade iron and some heavy industry. So they started to trade without adding additional tax on it, because before you had to have a tax when you bring goods to the country, when you bring product, they tax you on the border. They add like 15-20% tax, and then you have to sell it, which makes it hard to trade. So Europe really had a great idea where we said like, let's just make a union. It wasn't called European Union. It was just this like pact of countries, economic cooperation. And it was called like economic cooperation between like these, whatever, 5 countries. Then Denmark joined in, then Finland, then all the countries started joining in. And it kind of grew, and we said like, okay, let's do like free movement of people in Europe without having a passport, free travel, without needing, again, passport, you just need ID. Great ideas, by the way. Then free movement of goods and services without needing these VAT and the government border controls within the Schengen areas. So this is like genius. I love this. Anyone should be for this. So the beginning of Europe was really beautiful. European Union idea, economically speaking, was amazing. Let's get rid of taxes, let's get rid of borders, and let's trade among each other and make each other codependent so that we can't have a war against each other. Because in Europe, we had genocide, we had World War I, World War II. We're too much destroyed. We need to work together. So let's build union based on economy so that if one of us decides to kill everyone, it will not be worth it because we're all so tied in export and import. Perfect, grandiose idea. Love it. What happened? This continued, the economic progress continued, and then countries from our part of Europe, Central and Eastern, started joining in. 10 countries joined in, and now we have 29 countries. We said, okay, let's make a currency, let's make euro. And this is where things start kind of twisting. In 1993 in Maastricht, European Union is established as a thing. And then there's European Council, European Parliament, European Commission, Council of Europe, all these kind of weird things coming up. And then but it's still like, but wait a second, it's still the countries that have the power. It's still the nation state that dictates. It's still the people don't feel like they are European. Like Slovak people, maybe yes, they feel they are European, but they say we are Slovak. French say we're French. And they started coming up with these weird things where they would create like a European flag and also euro currency, and then these artificial ideas of European identity, community, Erasmus exchange program. I love that. I would definitely keep that. But then they started to make this huge bureaucratic body which takes out so much money, and it created so much corruption in these countries because of unclarity in terms of who donated which money to who. And then they started promoting these like European identity, and all these ideas. And then it switched around 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It started to promote these values, freedom, and we go to equality, and then we know what's the next one, right? But it started to go that way, and that's when now everyone sort of dislikes it, because in the beginning it was a great idea, and everyone was like, yeah, this makes sense. Like, why won't we get together and trade and make money? Like, let's do this. Then, and now there's talk about like common military and like just more integration. And people hate it. Like, Hungarians don't want to be integrated with Slovaks in one country. Like, we don't want that. We're fine with being neighbors. We're not killing each other. But we're not the same people. We don't have the same language, the same culture. Why would I want to be with them? Or with Germans? Like, what? Like, we are separate cultures, separate identities, and this is the project that they are trying to do. I mean, it's not gonna work probably, but that's basically what the liberals think. And then the realists think, no, you should just have like get rid of this EU and these other things in the world, and just have like nation states and kill each other all the time. All of these ideas, where do they make mistake? Well, pretty simple. What we have to remember is few things. All of these systems are expansionist in nature. Communism started in Russia, expanded, and then failed. Liberalism started in the UK, then expanded in the US, and it really grew right now. And each of these ideas want to expand, but why? Let's look at the underlying values of these systems. So one value, equality, like communism values equality more than freedom. There is no freedom in communism. Liberalism values individual freedom above everything else. And there's different systems around the world. But basically, no other system has any codified way of doing it. So at this stage of the history, it's just liberalism. Communism kind of is failing. So is there any alternative to this? Because it seems very depressing. Like, well, is this the way we have to kind of evolve into this cloud where I will be just eating pizza and having sex? Like, I don't want this, to be honest. I think we're killing human nature at some stage. It started nice, but I don't want this. I think everyone can agree that there must be some way to organize our societies, right? There must be like a better way and a worse way. At least we can rank them. So maybe liberalism is better than communism, and then dictatorship is worse than communism and liberalism, and then maybe like anarchy is even worse than that, right? So you have like these levels. But is there anything else besides liberalism? Is there anything else besides these systems? So all of these systems are built around values, but where do values come from? Values come from human intuitions and philosophers or religion. And so when we think about these values, each of these systems think they have superior value. So liberals think everyone should be free, everyone should experience freedom and drink beer. This is the human condition, this is the meaning of life. So that's the core value, and it's strong. Communists think, no, everyone should be equal, there should be no ownership, like this is the strongest value. It's very strong. And then you have different values like that, right? And if everyone thinks like that, of course, it's expansionist, and at some stage you're going to conflict with each other, and you will have to have military and war. There's no way around this, because all the wars are based around conflict between different groups of people who have different values. And so one group of people think their values are superior, but can we objectively measure values? That's the question, because we have to get down to the nitty-gritty. Who's right here? Which values are correct? We look at different values defined by the Human Rights Convention and all these things. So a value to have a democracy. Is this actually a value? Is Donald Trump the greatest achievement of democracy? Is democracy actually working in, let's say, South American countries? Is democracy better than communism? Well, go and ask someone in Moldova. Like, scan the population and ask them, were you happier under Soviet Union or democracy? And they'll tell you, Soviet Union, especially the older ones. And same here, like some people, at least like 10 to 15% will say like, yeah, Soviet was okay. We had a sense of community. We don't have it now. So wait a second. So like democracy cannot be then superior. And then you have these other values like freedom. But what freedom? What do you define by freedom? We have to define it specifically. It's loosely defined. And that's why it's then used by different people to justify horrific things. And so the best way to recognize the values is to debate. You have to put this sort of value against this one and debate it and figure out which one is better, which one is superior. All right? Once you attack the values, and once you actually get the other person agreement that yes, you won and your values are more superior or they make more sense, then you can change society without conflict. Once you change a human mind, they can change another one because it's a ripple effect of mind. They will start. It's expansionist in nature. As we said, every idea is expansionist in nature. If you find out the truth about the world right now, let's say you think democracy is the truth or whatever, LGBT, you want to spread it. Everyone thinks like that. So you will spread it to different people and you will create this new level of thought. Maybe with a couple of years, it will reverberate around society. Next level of human battle, human international relationships, whatever, it's not military conflict at all because it doesn't work. It's been proven. It's been proven. For example, the US intervention in Afghanistan with 60 other countries or whatever, it didn't work for 20 years. The most advanced military ever couldn't kill people that live in cages and goats. What? People have something. People have some identity that they can't get out. You can't impose the values. So we learned now. We can't impose the values. Communists try to impose the values on Slovak people. We hate communism now. Everyone hates it. Maybe 10% says it's nice. But everyone hates it. Same in Czech. Everyone hates communism. It's the worst. It's the same as Nazism. Hate it. Same for Nazism. Everyone hates Nazism. It was imposed by Hitler. Right? Anytime you impose a system, you will have like this conflict within it and it will fall apart. But if you can convince people that this is true and they opt in to the system on their own, well, that's the next level. Oh, subhanallah. But you can only convince someone that something is true if it is actually true. If you find something that is actually objectively true, and you can explain it and justify it to people, they will actually see it and they will want to be part of that in some way. I don't know. So now let's go back and let's see how it relates to Islam. By the way, all these things are mixed up. So Islam has parts of capitalism, of course, and also social democracy. Islam has parts of, now in political sense, right? Islam is part of realist idea, but it's part of the ummah as well, kind of liberal mindset, right? Where you kind of try to create a nations, basically ummah, that don't attack each other, right? It's a similar kind of idea. What is maybe another thing that many people haven't realized? Many people haven't. It's Islam. So Islam is a political system. Islam is economy. Islam is ummah. Islam is this idea of liberalism kind of in a nutshell as well. They are very similar because they are expansionist in nature. And they say our values are superior and they will create a society of people, but it's not imposed on them, the economic system or something else. More importantly, it's built around the belief, and the belief is built around Allah. How strong of an idea is that? And is this true? Is there Allah? Well, this is the questions we should be having. Because if Islam can actually prove, or not prove, you can never prove this kind of stuff, but if Islam can make sense for non-Muslims and it can present a real world, like say, like, hey, we have a belief in one God for Allah. We have rational arguments for it. Here they are. He comes, he gives us morality, he gives us values, and we want to be governed by it. Liberals say, no, we don't buy it. Communists say, we don't buy it. Good. Let's all agree. We will not be expanding militarily anymore. We'll have these coalitions to protect each other and nuclear weapons. Everyone has these. Let's agree on that. However, let's have a healthy dialogue to figure out the truth. And the dialogue is about values, and the dialogue is about what is correct, what is not correct, how do you know if there's a God? Where do you get your ideas from if you don't believe in God? And if we can all agree on this, that, okay, Islam will not be imposed on people as long as liberalism will not be imposed on Muslims, and communism will not be imposed on Muslims and non-Muslims, and then liberalism will not be imposed on communists, and then Islam will not be imposed on liberals. Everyone can live like they want. Let's not do anything, but let's just talk. Let's just chat. And I think this could be interesting. Subhanallah. Because what makes Islam different than any of these systems? Because Islam encompasses all of them, and it's not materialistic in nature. It's a religion that's spiritual, so it's built around something much deeper and much stronger. That's why you can't get rid of Islam. Like, you can't just... Islam is too deep in people. It's your heart that's connected to Allah. And if you can have a society and civilization around that, that's pretty powerful stuff. And so Islam gives answers to the most crucial questions of life, the most deep questions: what happens when you die, what's the purpose of life. It gives you this spiritual guide in your life, and it can run a society as well, right? So it can accomplish many things at the same time and be a third wave in the world. Islam will not be the mainstream, probably, not by any chance, at least right now. Islam is on the decline politically. It's on the decline, but by numbers and by people who believe, it's on the rise. And so if Islam, as Alija Izetbegovic, the Bosnian president, said, it's the third way, it's the third option. It's based around spirituality. It's not utilitarian in nature. It's not focused on materialism. It's focused on God. It's focused on something. It can keep people, focused on it can give society real values, real happiness. It's expansionist in nature, as every system is. So it's the only religion that can be positioned like that can basically go against these liberal things, because communism fell and there's no other idea that's coming along, guys. This is it. Liberalism is taking over. Fukuyama was right. So the only thing left, the only system that is actually kind of possible to go against the values is Islam. That's the last holdout. And they'll do whatever they can to get rid of it. Militarily, they tried, they can't. Because if you impose something by force, people will hate it. So they try to educate people and just send people and do all these things. Inshallah, listen. You either leave Islam alone, or Islam will have to stand up. Islam will have to stand up, basically, and say, like, okay, we think we can run the government, and we can be a third wave in the world, and that's it. So it's pretty interesting. This is what I gathered from the years of experience of studying this stuff. And I was just thinking about political Islam many times, and just like, people don't know how to implement it. That's true. People don't have ulama, or people differ on what's correct, and this is like a political kind of job, but then there's this religious context. It's very difficult to implement Islam in this like Sharia and this above state level. And anytime you talk about it, it's like political Islam is kind of different. It's Islamist, right? This is like and it links to terrorism and all these things. So this is the challenge for Muslims. And I'm not an expert, and I'm not a sheikh, and I'm not a mufti. So Muslims have to figure out, what do we do with political Islam? Because it's part of Islam. Like, it's in the Quran. I read the Quran. It's in there. It's not something made up. So how do we deal with this? And what do we do about these commands? Of course, in different contexts. Like here, we're not going to even touch it. But if you live in a Muslim country, do you become more Muslim? Do you become less? Do you become secularized? What happens? These are all good questions. Let me know what you think is the future of the world. and if Islam can actually be the third wave. And really, guys, I don't talk about it from a perspective of Muslim now. So I talk about it from a perspective of someone who studied these things and who never realized that Islam could be actually another option. And I see it now, it could be, but it has, of course, issues, many issues. But the problem is it's true. So if Islam is true, now how do we implement it? That's something we need to figure out, and we've been trying to figure out for 1,400 years, and it's been going well like 1,000 years ago, but now it's on the decline. So let's figure out what to do, because we already have the guidance, we already know the source, we already know the values, we already know the basics. And if you don't do anything, you will get secularized, you will get liberalized, and Islam will be basically what you will be like. In communism, you will get banned, like Islam. Liberalism allows religion, but it's laughable, and they will basically not allow to challenge for Islam to challenge any values. You will have to accommodate for whatever values they come up with. So the way to enter to do this is to debate people and to explain Islam and to really enter people's hearts. Because once people change, like I changed my values, it's so powerful. You don't need a war. You just need to tell them the truth. Because if the truth is presented to you and you accept it, subhanAllah, like if you see the truth, I don't need to kill you or whatever. You don't need to kill me. We don't need to impose any other values. I will present to you evidences and you will see it or not see it. And if you will see it, you'll be very happy. And so that's what it's all about. That's what we want. So just try to, and don't shove it down to people's throat. You know, this stuff. You have to be smart about this. Like, people are very smart, especially here. Like, you can't just say there's God. That's it. How? What? So do it. And guys, one more thing. I wrote a book, Cosmological Arguments Why God Must Exist. It got like 9 pages, and I think I will publish this as an ebook for you to download in the coming days. So it's full of basically contingency arguments from, let me just give you a brief intro. So it's about how do we get knowledge. So scientific experiments. What are the 3 types of existences in our world? I'm giving you a preview. You don't have to pay for this. This is what you need to defend your faith in some certain circumstance. What's the composition theory? Why is anything that's made of parts contingent? How does that make sense? How do you explain determinism and fight it? What about multiverse theory? What if this is a multiverse? Oh yeah. What's a set of contingent things and how it can be linear or circular or whatever? What is a Kalam argument? So how the causality functions. Why is there no infinity? So what's infinity? How we should understand infinity in philosophy. What is nothing and how is something? How something can come from nothing? What's an a priori principle in philosophy in some sense? What's a quantum vacuum? Is that nothing? Is that something? Again, multiverse theory, touching on it. And then 3 options for universe. What about, is this fallacy of composition? Maybe you're making too much faith jumps. Does this necessary being, if we prove it, have intelligence? Does it have a mind? Does it have a will? What about fine-tuning? What about design? What if there are multiple causes? And what's the answer? So that's it. Some of the arguments are compiled. So I'm excited to post this. But thank you for listening to me. I think this was cool video, and hopefully we'll be in touch in the future, inshallah. So leave me a comment, please. It helps my videos and my algorithm, and Let me know what you think about the world political systems, but be careful. Don't blame US for everything. Don't blame China for everything. Don't blame Russia for everything. Everyone is expansionist in nature. Everyone wants to expand their ideas. So try to understand it from their point of view, right? I was in their shoes. I was promoting liberalism. I would want people to die for it. Like, I thought we are superior. Just as some person in Islam might think like we are superior and let's get rid of this. And some Russian communists can think like, no, communists are superior. Chinese people are superior. So this is what the battle is. And this is the values, right? Subhanallah. Leave me a comment, and until next time, Assalamu alaikum.